always thought my life was perfect or, at least, perfectly predictable. I could trace every line of my existence with unwavering certainty, from the first cup of coffee James brewed for me each morning, down to the way he folded the newspaper when he was finished reading. Everything about our life felt meticulously crafted, like a well-edited novel with no room for surprises. I never imagined there could be secrets buried within our domestic bliss. James was the kind of husband other women envied. He was attentive, charming, and successful, a high-level executive at a prestigious investment firm. We had a beautiful home nestled in the suburbs, with a garden I adored tending. Our friends called us the perfect couple, and I never had a reason to doubt them. James and I were in sync, or so I believed. But there was always this one thing, this one small, seemingly inconsequential thing that gnawed at the back of my mind. In our walk-in closet, tucked away behind rows of perfectly ironed shirts and meticulously organized ties, sat a small, nondescript safe. It was the only thing in our entire home that James had ever asked me not to touch. "It's just some business papers," he'd said once, his tone casual but firm, as though daring me to challenge him. "Nothing you need to worry about, darling." At first, I didn't give it much thought. But over time, that safe became a symbol of everything I didn't know about the man I had promised to spend my life with. Why would he keep something so securely locked away? Was it really just business papers? If it was, why couldn't I see them? The curiosity started as a small flicker, barely noticeable, but it grew, day by day, until it consumed me. James traveled often for work, sometimes for days at a time. On those nights, our grand house felt emptier than usual, the silence weighing on me like a heavy cloak. I would sit in our room, staring at the closet door, feeling the pull of that forbidden box. What was in there? Was it really just papers, or something more? My thoughts spiraled into wild theories. Perhaps it was evidence of an affair, or maybe even something darker. The possibilities were endless and terrifying. One evening, when James was away on yet another business trip, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. The safe had become an obsession, a locked door behind which I imagined all sorts of possibilities, none of them good. My hands trembled as I walked to the closet, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was about to cross a line I could never uncross, but I couldn't stop myself. I'd seen James enter the code once, years ago, when he thought I wasn't looking. It was just a glimpse, but I never forgot it. 5241. It was his favorite numbers, our wedding anniversary. My fingers hesitated over the keypad as I wondered what I was about to uncover. Then, with a deep breath, I punched in the code and turned the handle. The safe door swung open, and I was met with something far more shocking than I could have ever imagined. Inside, there wasn't a stack of papers or any mundane business documents. Instead, there was a small, unassuming black box and a collection of passports. I picked one up, flipping through the pages, and felt my stomach drop. The photo was of James, but the name was not. In fact, none of the names matched the man I thought I knew. My hands shook as I sifted through the other items in the safe. A set of keys, a few credit cards with different names, and a letter sealed in an envelope with no return address. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. This couldn't be real. I had to be misunderstanding something. But as I stood there, staring at the contents of the safe, I knew that whatever explanation James had, it would change everything. I had unlocked more than just a safe. I had unlocked a secret life, one I wasn't sure I was ready to confront, and yet, there was no going back now. I sat on the edge of our bed, the passports and letters scattered beside me, trying to catch my breath. My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots, but nothing made sense. Who was this man I had married? What had he been hiding from me all these years? The passports were the first to grab my attention, each one with a different name, but all with James's face staring back at me. Every identity had a story behind it, a life lived in parallel to the one we shared. The dates of entry and exit in various countries spanned years, overlapping with our marriage. Was he leading a double life? No, this was more than just two lives, these were multiple lives, all carefully constructed, hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect existence. I could hardly breathe as I picked up the black box. It was heavy, and I could hear something rattling inside. My fingers fumbled with the clasp, and when it finally opened, I was met with a collection of photographs, each one more confusing than the last. There were pictures of James with another woman, her face unfamiliar but her smile intimate. In some, they were holding hands, in others, they were with a child, a little girl with James's eyes. The dates on the back of the photos were recent. Too recent. The woman in the photos wasn't me. The girl wasn't ours. My heart pounded in my chest as the truth began to settle in. James had another family. A whole other life I knew nothing about. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the breath out of me. The perfect life I thought I had was nothing but a facade. The man I loved had been lying to me for years, living a life I was never meant to know about. I felt the sting of betrayal so deeply it was as though I had been physically struck, but there was more. The letter, still sealed, sat in my lap like a ticking time bomb. I was terrified of what it might reveal, but I knew I had to open it. With trembling hands, I tore the envelope open, unfolding the paper inside. The letter was handwritten, the ink smudged in places as if the writer had hesitated. To my beloved, it began, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. I knew James's handwriting well, it was unmistakably his. If you're reading this, then you've discovered what I've hidden from you. There are no words to justify what I've done, and I won't insult you by trying. But there are things you need to know, things that go beyond our life together. I read on, each word cutting deeper than the last. James confessed to living multiple lives, with different women, in different cities. He explained that his job wasn't just in finance, but something far more dangerous, something that required him to maintain these identities to protect himself and us. I never wanted you to find out this way, he wrote, but if you've come this far, there's no turning back. You must understand that everything I did was to keep you safe. You were never meant to be a part of this world. But now that, there are choices you need to make, choices I can't make for you. The letter went on to provide instructions, vague and ominous, on what I should do next. He spoke of safety protocols, emergency contacts, and people I was supposed to trust in case something happened to him. It was like stepping into a spy novel, only this was real. My life was real. As I read the last line of the letter, my blood ran cold. If you value your life, you must forget. If you value your life, you must forget what you've discovered and leave everything behind. The words reverberated in my mind like a cruel echo, repeating themselves over and over until they lost all meaning and became a hollow mantra. How could I forget? How could I leave everything behind? My entire life had just been shattered into a million jagged pieces, and the man I thought I knew was urging me to abandon it all, as if that were even possible. But as I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered reality, another question began to claw its way to the forefront of my mind. Who was I, really? The letter spoke of safety protocols and identities. As if they were second nature, as if I should understand what they meant. Was there more to me than I knew? The thought was absurd. I'd always known who I was, hadn't I? But now, with every new revelation, I started to question the very foundation of my existence. I walked to the mirror, searching for any signs of this person I was supposed to be. My reflection stared back at me, familiar, yet suddenly strange. My chestnut hair, usually carefully styled, now fell in disarray around my face. My eyes, which James used to say were the first thing he noticed about me, were wide with panic, haunted by the unknown. Who was I? Was I just the loving wife of James, or was there more buried deep within me? The letter left me with no clear answers, only more questions. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. But where could I even begin? The house that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed like a prison, its walls closing in on me, suffocating me with secrets. I knew there was more hidden here, there had to be. James was meticulous, always careful to cover his tracks, but he'd grown comfortable in our life. Together. Maybe he'd slipped up, left behind a clue that could help me unravel this nightmare. I spent the rest of the night searching through every corner of our home. The closets, the drawers, the spaces behind the furniture, I scoured them all, looking for anything that could provide answers. My heart raced with each discovery, small fragments of truth that only deepened the mystery. An old phone with encrypted messages, a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize, and a box filled with items that belonged to someone else, another woman, perhaps, from one of his other lives. But the most chilling discovery was a set of documents hidden in the attic, beneath a loose floorboard. They were legal papers, adoption papers, to be exact. The names on the documents were unfamiliar, but the photograph attached told a different story. It was a picture of me, or at least, someone who looked just like me, holding a baby. The date on the papers was over 20 years ago, long before I ever met James, and my hands trembled as I tried to make sense of it. How could this be possible? I had no memory of this. Had I really been someone else? My mind raced back to fragmented memories, blurred and faded like old photographs, memories I'd long since pushed away. Faces, names, places, they all swirled together in a chaotic storm, taunting me with half-formed images that refused to come into focus. Was it possible that I had lived another life before James? A life I had forgotten, or perhaps had been made to forget? The thought was terrifying, yet it felt like the only explanation that made sense. Everything about my life had been too perfect, too controlled. Had James been protecting me, or had he been controlling me, manipulating my memories and my reality? I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to understand who I really was. The woman in those adoption papers, the one who looked like me, was she the key to everything? And if so, what had happened to her? To me, as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I realized that I had to confront James. There was no other way forward. But I couldn't just wait for him to return. If what he had written in the letter was true, then I was in danger. And if he was involved in whatever dark past I had, then I couldn't trust him to tell me the truth. That I had to find him, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. The morning air was crisp and sharp, cutting through the remnants of my sleepless night as I stepped outside. The world seemed unnervingly normal, as if it didn't care that my entire existence had been upended. But I knew better. This was just the calm before the storm. I needed to find James, but I had no idea where to start. He could be anywhere, living any one of his lives. But I knew his habits, his patterns. He was meticulous, always careful, but also predictable in his routines. I decided to start with his office. If there was any place where his guard might be down, where he might have left behind something useful, it would be there. The drive into the city was surreal, the familiar sights passing by in a blur as my thoughts raced. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, a constant reminder of the fear that had settled deep in my chest. What if he found out that I knew? What if he'd already suspected something was wrong? Paranoia crept in, but I pushed it aside. I needed to focus. James's office was in a sleek, modern building downtown. He rarely took me there, saying it was just boring work stuff I wouldn't be interested in. But now, as I approached the building, it took on a new significance. What secrets had he hidden here, right under my nose? I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, hoping to avoid any security cameras that might alert him to my presence. The lobby was bright and busy, filled with people rushing about their day, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I slipped in unnoticed, blending into the crowd as I made my way to the elevators. When I reached James's floor, I was relieved to find it mostly empty. It was still early, and only a few employees were milling about. His office was at the end of a long hallway, the door closed, as it always was. I took a deep breath and turned the handle, praying it was unlocked. The room was exactly as I remembered it, clean, minimalist, with nothing out of place. But this time, I wasn't here as a doting wife. I was here as a woman on a mission. I began searching through his desk, carefully opening drawers and rifling through files. Most of it was mundane, just as he'd always said, contracts, reports, business as usual. But I knew there had to be more. I moved to his computer, hoping it might hold the answers I sought. I powered it on, and to my surprise, it didn't require a password. James must have been confident that no one would ever get this far. I quickly began searching through his emails, his files, anything that might give me a clue. At first, it was just work correspondence, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I found a folder buried deep within his files, labeled simply personal. My heart pounded as I clicked on it. Inside were dozens of documents, photos, notes, even audio recordings. I opened the first file, and my blood ran cold. It was a dossier on me. Or rather, on the woman I used to be. There were photos of me from years ago, before I met James, doing things I had no memory of, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, talking to people I couldn't name. The notes were detailed. documenting my every move, my habits, my interactions. 1. Document stood out, marked as key subject. It was a psychological profile, describing my behavior, my likes and dislikes, my fears. It was chillingly accurate, but there were parts that didn't match the person I thought I was. It mentioned traumatic events I couldn't remember, relationships I had no knowledge of. It was as if this file was about someone else entirely, and yet, it was undeniably about me. The final document was a contract, signed by James and someone named Dr. Alan Carter. The details were vague, but it was clear that this contract was about me, about erasing parts of my past, creating a new identity. The words memory modification jumped out at me, sending a wave of nausea through my body. This was it. This was the truth I had been searching for, but it wasn't the truth I wanted. My entire life, my memories, my identity, it had all been fabricated, carefully constructed by the man I thought I loved. But why? What had happened in my past that was so terrible it needed to be erased? Before I could process any of it, I heard footsteps approaching the office. My heart leapt into my throat as I quickly shut down the computer and backed away from the desk. The door creaked open, and I turned to see a man standing in the doorway, not James, but someone I didn't recognize. He looked at me with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite but guarded. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was just waiting for James. Is he in yet?" The man frowned. "James? He's out of the country on business. Didn't he tell you?" I swallowed hard, nodding as I backed toward the door. Of course. I must have gotten the dates mixed up. The man didn't say anything as I slipped past him and out into the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I had to get out of there before he became any more suspicious. I needed to figure out my next move, but first, I had to get somewhere safe, somewhere I could think, because now, more than ever, I knew that nothing in my life was as it seemed. The streets blurred around me as I drove, my mind spinning in 1,000 directions. The more I tried to grasp the truth, the further it seemed to slip from my reach. Every discovery only deepened the mystery. What had I been before I became the woman I thought I was? Who was Dr. Alan Carter, and what role had he played in rewriting my life? Most importantly, why had James orchestrated this elaborate charade? I needed answers, but I also needed to get away. The man in James's office might not have been a direct threat, but his presence was a stark reminder that I was treading on dangerous ground. I couldn't return to the house. If James was watching, and I had no doubt that he'd know I was onto him. My car's GPS would likely be tracked too, so I ditched it in a parking lot downtown, deciding to make my next moves on foot. I made my way to a small, nondescript cafe on the other side of town. It was a place I'd visited a few times, but nothing about it tied me directly to James. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods hung in the air, a comforting contrast to the turmoil inside me. I found a table in the back, away from the windows, and tried to collect my thoughts. I pulled out my phone, hesitating for a moment before disabling the GPS and turning off location services. Then, I began searching for Dr. Alan Carter. His name was the only solid lead I had. I sifted through dozens of search results, most of them irrelevant, but then I found an article that made my blood run cold. Dr. Alan Carter, a renowned psychiatrist, had been involved in a controversial research project years ago, a project focused on experimental memory modification techniques. The details were vague, the article heavily redacted, but it was clear that his work had been far from ethical. There were rumors of patients who had undergone the treatment, only to emerge with fractured memories, some unable to remember their pasts at all. The project had been shut down amid scandal, and Dr. Carter had disappeared from the public eye. This was the man James had hired to manipulate my memories. But why? What had I known, or what had I been, before this? The thought that someone had tampered with my mind, had altered the very essence of who I was, made my skin crawl. I had to find Dr. Carter, wherever he was, and confront him. He held the key to my past. As I sat there, trying to piece together a plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The cafe was quiet, with only a few patrons scattered around, but I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. I glanced around, but no one seemed to be paying any attention to me. Still, The paranoia was hard to dismiss. Was James already onto me? Or was it just my mind, frayed by the day's revelations, playing tricks on me? I decided to move quickly. I couldn't stay in one place for too long, not when the walls seemed to be closing in on me. I left the cafe, paying in cash to avoid leaving a trail, and ducked into a nearby alley. I needed a new phone, something James couldn't track, and a way to get out of the city. But first, I needed to know more about Dr. Carter's work. There was one place that might have answers, the Public Records Office downtown. If Dr. Carter had been involved in any legal disputes or had his medical license revoked, there would be a record of it there. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I slipped into the records office just as it was opening for the day. The building was old, the kind that hadn't been updated in decades, with rows of filing cabinets and stacks of dusty books. The clerk at the front desk barely looked up as I walked in, which suited me just fine. I found an old terminal in the back and began searching through the records, trying to keep my growing anxiety in check. Hours passed as I sifted through endless files, most of them dead ends. But finally, I found a case that mentioned Dr. Carter. It was a lawsuit, filed by the family of a woman who had been one of his patients. The suit claimed that Dr. Carter had used experimental techniques to erase parts of the woman's memory, leaving her with severe psychological trauma. The case had been settled out of court, the details sealed, but it was clear that Dr. Carter's work had destroyed lives. As I read through the documents, I found a name that stopped me cold: Rebecca Halden. It was the name of the woman in the lawsuit, but it also rang a bell deep within me, like an echo from a forgotten dream. I didn't know why, but I felt an undeniable connection to her, as if her story and mine were intertwined. I copied down the information I could find on Rebecca Halden and left the records office, my mind racing. I had to find her, if she was still alive. She might hold the answers I was searching for, answers that could help me understand what had been done to me. But as I stepped out into the street, I realized that my journey had only just begun. The truth was out there, somewhere, but I would have to be prepared to face whatever darkness it revealed. Rebecca Halden. The name lingered in my mind like a half-remembered melody, familiar yet elusive. It gnawed at me as I walked through the bustling streets, feeling more like a ghost than a living person. My world was unraveling faster than I could comprehend, but this name, this person, felt like the key to unlocking the truth. I had to find her. My first thought was to search public records for any trace of her current whereabouts, but I knew that would take time I might not have. I needed a more direct approach, something that would lead me to her quickly. I thought about the old phone I had found in the attic. Perhaps it could offer a clue. If it had belonged to me or to Rebecca, it might contain contacts or messages that could point me in the right direction. But I couldn't go back to the house to retrieve it, not with the risk of being watched. I needed help, someone I could trust, but trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. The only person I could think of was my best friend, Sarah. She and I had been inseparable since college, and she was the one person who had always stood by me, no matter what. But could I drag her into this nightmare? Could I trust her, knowing that my entire life had been a lie? I hesitated, but in the end, I had no choice. If there was anyone who might help me without asking too many questions, it was Sarah. I made my way to a payphone, the kind that still existed in the seedier parts of the city, and dialed her number. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice a warm, familiar balm to my frayed nerves. "Hello, Sarah, it's me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need your help." There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear the concern in her voice when she spoke again. "Anna, what's wrong? You sound off." "I can't explain everything right now," I said, struggling to keep the panic out of my voice. "But I need you to go to my house and find something for me. It's in the attic, under the floorboard near the window. There's an old phone hidden there. I need you to get it and meet me." "Anna, this sounds serious. Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Yes," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But I can't tell you more right now. Please, just trust me." Another pause, longer this time, and I could almost hear Sarah's mind working through the possibilities. Finally, she sighed. "Okay. Where do you want to meet?" I gave her the address of a small park on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes. It was a place we used to go when we needed to talk in private, away from the rest of the world. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. Be careful, Anna, she replied, her voice heavy with worry. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together. I hung up, the weight of my decision settling on my shoulders. If Sarah got involved, she would be in danger too. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed her, now more than ever. The wait for Sarah felt interminable, each minute stretching into an eternity as I sat on a bench in the park, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Every passing stranger seemed suspicious, every rustling leaf a potential threat. But I couldn't let paranoia consume me. I had to stay focused. Finally, I saw her car pull up, and Sarah emerged, holding a small, old-fashioned phone in her hand. Relief washed over me as she approached, her eyes filled with concern. Anna, what's going on? She asked as she handed me the phone. I've never seen you like this before. You're scaring me. I took the phone, clutching it like a lifeline. I'm sorry, Sarah. I wish I could explain everything, but I honestly don't know the full story myself. All I know is that my life isn't what I thought it was, and I'm in danger. This phone might have some answers. She sat down beside me, her expression serious. Then let's find out. With shaking hands, I powered on the phone. It was old, and it took a moment to boot up, but when it did, the screen flickered to life, displaying a list of contacts and old text messages. Most of the names were unfamiliar, but one stood out, Rebecca. My breath caught in my throat as I clicked on the name, opening a series of text exchanges between me and this Rebecca. The messages were fragmented, some deleted, but what remained painted a disturbing picture. They spoke of a plan, of running away, of escaping someone or something. And then there was a final message, short and chilling: we can't trust him. Meet me at the old house. He knows too much. Who is him? Sarah asked, reading over my shoulder. I don't know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But I think I was trying to escape, before all of this happened. Before my memories were altered. Sarah's eyes widened. Altered? Anna, this is insane. Are you saying someone messed with your memories? Yes, I said, the reality of it settling in like a lead weight. And I think Rebecca was involved somehow. But I don't remember any of it. I scrolled through the messages, searching for any clues about this old house. Finally, I found an address buried in one of the earlier texts. It was a place on the outskirts of the city, far from where we were now. I have to go there, I said, my voice resolute. I need to find Rebecca and figure out what happened. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip firm. Anna, this sounds dangerous. You can't go alone. I have to, I insisted. If what I'm remembering is true, then this place holds the key to everything. She looked at me, torn between fear and concern. Finally, she nodded. Then I'm coming with you. Sarah, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask, she interrupted, her voice steady. I'm coming, whether you like it or not. I smiled weakly, grateful for her loyalty. Thank you. As we got into her car and drove toward the address in the text message, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were heading into the unknown, into the heart of the darkness that had been haunting me. Whatever awaited us at that old house, I knew it would change everything, and as the city faded behind us, I braced myself for whatever truth we were about to uncover. The road stretched out before us, a winding path through dense woods that grew thicker as we left the city behind. The air felt different here, heavier, as if the trees themselves were conspiring to keep secrets hidden. Sarah drove in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, while my thoughts churned with a mixture of fear and determination. The old house was out there, waiting for us, a place tied to the fragments of memories that had begun to resurface. Whatever we found there, it would either provide the answers I so desperately needed or plunge me deeper into the abyss of uncertainty. The GPS led us to a narrow, overgrown driveway, almost invisible from the road. As we turned onto it, the car bumped and jostled over the uneven ground, the trees closing in on either side like dark sentinels. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a reminder of the gravity of what we were about to do there, Sarah said, nodding toward a shadowy structure that loomed ahead. The house was large but neglected, its once grand facade now weathered and crumbling. Ivy crawled up the walls, and the windows were dark, some of them broken. It looked as if no one had set foot here in years, yet something about it tugged at the edge of my consciousness, Familiar and foreboding. We parked the car a little ways down the driveway, out of sight from the road. As we stepped out, the silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The house seemed to watch us, a silent guardian of whatever secrets it held. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice low. She was trying to be brave, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "No," I admitted. "But I have to know." We approached the front door, the wooden steps creaking under our weight. The door itself was ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry and never returned. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was musty, thick with dust and the scent of decay. The foyer was large, with a grand staircase leading up to the second floor. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and cobwebs hung in the corners. It was a house that had seen better days, now abandoned and forgotten, but not entirely. There were signs of recent activity, footprints in the dust, a few pieces of furniture that looked as though they'd been moved. Someone had been here, and recently. We began to explore, our footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Each room we entered felt like a step back in time, the remnants of the past scattered about like clues in a puzzle. A broken mirror, an old photograph, a child's toy left behind. It was eerie, as if the house was frozen in the moment its occupants had fled, leaving everything behind in their haste. As we moved through the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows seemed to shift and move, and I could swear I heard whispers, just beyond the edge of hearing. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, or if the house itself was alive with memories. We reached what appeared to be a study, the door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, revealing a room that was more intact than the others. Books lined the shelves, and a large desk sat in the center, papers scattered across it. The air in this room was different, charged, as if it held the weight of many untold stories. I walked over to the desk, my hands trembling as I began to sift through the papers. Most of them were old, yellowed with age, but a few were more recent. I found letters, contracts, and a series of notes in a handwriting that I recognized immediately, my own. They were fragments, disjointed thoughts and plans, but one word appeared over and over: escape. The notes spoke of fear, of a need to get away from someone, though the name was never mentioned. But it was clear that I, or the person I had been planning to leave, to disappear before something terrible happened. "What is it?" Sarah asked, peering over my shoulder. "These are mine," I said, my voice trembling. "But I don't remember writing them." I kept searching through the desk, my desperation growing. I needed to find something, anything, that would explain what had happened here. Then, at the bottom of a drawer, I found a small, leather-bound journal. It was worn, the edges frayed, but when I opened it, I knew it was important. The first few pages were blank, but then the writing began, and I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was mine. The entries were short, hurried, as if I, or the person I was, had been writing them in secret. The first entry sent a chill down my spine. ****, I don't know who I am anymore. The man I trusted, the man I thought I loved, has turned my life into a nightmare. I've uncovered something terrible, something that he'll do anything to keep hidden. I have to get out, but I'm scared. He knows too much. He's everywhere, watching my every move. If something happens to me, I need someone to know the truth. The truth about James, and about the woman I used to be. Before he changed me. ****, Sarah gasped as she read over my shoulder. "Oh my God, Anna, this is insane." I nodded, my eyes scanning the pages for more clues. The entries detailed my growing fear, my realization that the life I'd been living was a lie, constructed to hide something horrible. There were references to Rebecca, to the plan we'd made to escape, and to Dr. Carter. But then, suddenly, the entries stopped. The last entry was brief, just a few lines scrawled in a shaky hand. ****, I don't know if I'll make it out of this. He's closing in, and I can feel the walls tightening around me. If I don't survive, I hope someone finds this journal. I hope they can put the pieces together. The truth is out there, buried deep, but it's real. I used to be someone else. But I can't remember who. ****, the room spun around me as I finished reading. My own words, written by a version of myself I couldn't remember, revealing a life I had no memory of. This was the truth I had been searching for, but it was more terrifying than I had imagined. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. Anna, we need to get out of here. Now. I nodded, my mind racing. But as we turned to leave the study, we heard it, a soft creak, the unmistakable sound of a floorboard shifting under weight. Someone else was in the house. My heart leapt into my throat as Sarah and I exchanged a panicked glance. We had to leave, before whoever was here found us. But as we backed out of the room, the creaking grew louder, closer. Someone was coming, and we were trapped. Panic surged through me as the footsteps grew louder, echoing down the hallway. Sarah grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear, and for a moment, I felt paralyzed. Whoever was in the house with us was getting closer, and the oppressive weight of the secrets I'd uncovered made it hard to think clearly. We had to move, to escape before it was too late, but the terror that gripped me made it difficult to act. We need to hide, Sarah whispered urgently, her voice trembling. Now. I nodded, forcing myself to move. We slipped out of the study and down the hallway, our footsteps as quiet as we could manage. The house was a maze of darkened rooms and narrow corridors, and in the dim light, it was hard to tell which way led to safety. The footsteps behind us grew fainter, then stopped altogether, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. We found a small closet at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Without a word, we ducked inside, pulling the door closed behind us. The space was cramped, filled with old coats and boxes, but it was better than being out in the open. I held my breath, listening intently for any sign of movement. Time seemed to stretch, each second ticking by with agonizing slowness. My mind raced with possibilities. Who could be in the house? Was it James? Had he somehow tracked us down? Or was it someone else, someone who knew the truth about my past? The sound of a door creaking open somewhere nearby made my heart skip a beat. Whoever it was, they were close, and they were searching for us. I squeezed Sarah's hand, trying to draw strength from her presence. We couldn't stay hidden forever. Eventually, we'd have to face whoever, or whatever, was out. There, finally, the footsteps faded into the distance, and the house fell silent once more. We waited a few moments longer before daring to breathe again. I pushed the closet door open just a crack, peering out into the hallway. It was empty, but the air was thick with tension, as if the house itself was holding its breath. We need to get out of here, I whispered, turning to Sarah. But we have to be careful. She nodded, her face pale but determined. We slipped out of the closet and began to make our way back toward the front of the house, our footsteps muffled by the old carpet. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but the fear that gnawed at me made it difficult. We had to get out of the house before whoever was inside realized we were still here. As we reached the foyer, I heard the sound of a car engine rumbling to life outside. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Had they seen our car? Were they waiting for us outside? Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to think rationally. We had to act, and quickly. Come on, I whispered to Sarah, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the front door. We have to move now. We slipped out of the house and into the cool night air, the darkness wrapping around us like a shroud. The driveway was empty, but I could see the taillights of a car disappearing down the road. Whoever it was, they were leaving, but they could come back at any moment. We sprinted to Sarah's car, our footsteps pounding against the ground, and jumped inside. Sarah fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking as she tried to start the engine. Come on, she muttered under her breath. Finally, the engine roared to life, and we peeled out of the driveway, leaving the old house and its secrets behind us. My heart raced as we sped down the winding road, the trees blurring past in a dark haze. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see. What the hell just happened? Sarah asked, her voice tight with fear. I don't know, I admitted, trying to catch my breath. But I think we were followed. Someone was in that house, looking for us. Do you think it was James? I don't know, I repeated, my mind reeling. But whoever it was, they know something. We need to figure out what's going on before they catch up to us. As we drove back toward the city, the tension in the car was palpable. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, trying to piece together the puzzle that was my life. The journal, the notes, the fragmented memories, they were all pieces of a larger, more terrifying truth. But the picture they formed was still incomplete, and the answers I sought seemed just out of reach. We needed to regroup, to find a safe place where we could think and plan our next move. But as the city lights appeared on the horizon, I knew that there was no going back. My old life was gone, shattered by the revelations of the past few days. All that remained was the search for the truth, no matter where it led or what it uncovered. As Sarah drove, I took out the old phone and began scrolling through the contacts and messages again, hoping to find something I'd missed before. One name caught my eye: Dr. Alan Carter. The man who had been at the center of this nightmare. There was a single, recent message from him: ***, we need to talk. There's more you don't know. Meet me at the clinic tomorrow. Come alone. ***, I felt a chill run down my spine. Dr. Carter knew something crucial. But could I trust him? Was this a trap, another attempt to manipulate me? Or was he the key to unlocking the truth about who I really was? I turned to Sarah, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I need to meet with Dr. Carter. He might have the answers we need. Are you sure? She asked, glancing at me with concern. What if it's a trap? It might be, I admitted. But I have to take that chance. He's the only one who knows what happened to me. Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. Then we'll go together. But we need to be careful, Anna. Whoever is behind this, they're dangerous. I know, I said, the weight of that truth pressing down on me. But we can't run forever. It's time to confront this head-on. As we drove through the city streets, heading toward the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was coming to a head. The answers I sought were within reach, but they came with a price. The truth, once revealed, would change everything, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it. Wasn't the answer. The past had a way of catching up, and I couldn't live knowing that the organization was still out there, preying on others. No, I said firmly. We have to finish this. We have to stop them. She nodded, though her expression was conflicted. All right. But promise me you'll be careful. I promise, I said, though I knew that promises meant little in the face of the dangers we faced. The night of the confrontation arrived. With Dr. Carter's help, we had pinpointed the location of the evidence, a secure storage facility on the outskirts of the city. The plan was simple: break in, retrieve the evidence, and get out before Kazarian's men had a chance to catch us. As we approached the facility, the adrenaline surged through me, sharpening my senses. The building was heavily guarded, but we had a way-in, a vent system that led directly to the storage rooms. We slipped inside, moving with practiced precision, our every move calculated and deliberate. The facility was a maze of steel and concrete, the air cold and sterile. We followed the blueprints Dr. Carter had provided, navigating through the corridors and bypassing security systems. My heart pounded in my chest, every sound magnified in the silence. Finally, we reached the storage room where the evidence was kept. I worked quickly, my hands shaking as I opened the safe and retrieved the files. The documents were old, but they contained everything needed to take down Kazarian and his organization. It was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence that would destroy them. As we prepared to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. We were running out of time. Let's go, I hissed to Sarah, grabbing the files and heading toward the exit. We retraced our steps, but the facility was no longer as empty as it had been. Guards were everywhere, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. We had to fight our way out, every step a battle for survival. Sarah and I moved as one, our training and adrenaline guiding us. We fought off the guards, using the element of surprise to our advantage. The fight was fierce, but we managed to make it to the exit, the evidence safely in our possession. As we drove away from the facility, the weight of what we had accomplished began to sink in. We had done it. We had retrieved the evidence and survived the confrontation, but the victory was bittersweet. The organization was still out there, and the danger wasn't over. We would need to go public with the evidence, expose Kazarian and his criminal empire for the world to see. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Back at the safe house, we prepared to go public with the evidence. The media would be our next battleground, and the truth would be our weapon. Dr. Carter agreed to help us coordinate the release, using his connections to ensure that the story would get out to the right people. As I sat in the safe house, Looking over the evidence that would bring Kazarian down, I felt a strange sense of closure. The life I had lived as Anna was gone, replaced by the truth of who I really was. But with that truth came a new beginning, a chance to rebuild and fight for justice. Sarah stood by my side, her presence a constant source of strength. Together, we faced the future with resolve, knowing that the road ahead would be challenging. But we were ready to face it, ready to confront the shadows of the past and build a new life from the ruins. The journey had been long and filled with uncertainty, but it had led me to this moment. The truth had been revealed, and with it, a new chapter began. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a purpose. The battle for justice was just beginning, and I was ready to face it head-on. With Sarah by my side and the evidence in hand, I knew that we would see this through to the end. The truth would prevail, and the darkness would be driven away. And in that moment, as the dawn broke over the city, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The shadows of the past and build a new life from the ruins. The journey had been long and filled with uncertainty, but it had led me to this moment. The truth had been revealed, and with it, a new chapter began. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a purpose. The battle for justice was just beginning, and I was ready to face it head-on. With Sarah by my side and the evidence in hand, I knew that we would see this through to the end. The truth would prevail, and the darkness would be driven away. And in that moment, as the dawn broke over the city, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future.